Gamani Giahiv, Mokarja Galer, or Foot na Crinja. Is Misha Anton, August on Clarshaw. Is 205. Is it Do Gochid August Kuig? You're all very welcome to the Mythical Ireland Library. And I did notice one thing. If you've been listening to the intro music, when you finally hear me speaking, it sounds a lot quieter. So I apologize for the difference in volume. I will do my best to make up for it. You're all very welcome on this Winter Solstice Eve, our closest Live Irish Myths episode to the Winter Solstice this year. The sun is pretty much standing still now. To all intents and purposes, you will not see it moving for the next while. We have reached the shortest days, although there is something peculiar about the latest sunrise and the earliest sunset. And if you've been following the Newgrange and Nouth Brunabonia page on Facebook, you'll have seen a nice explanation of that last week. A very good evening. If you're joining us, please, first of all, there's plenty of room. Make yourself comfortable. Some people want to sit in the front row this week, understandably, since they haven't been here in a while. I'm only joking. I hope you're all safe and warm and dry and well fed and well watered wherever you are in the world. This is episode number 205. Tonight, we are exploring the work of Sir James George Frazer. But before that, hello to Guido Bruce, who is saying good evening from a wet Netherlands. Well, after a couple of weeks of very, very cold, icy weather, the temperature went up to 13 Celsius today. It dropped again, though. But cloudy at Newgrange this morning. I did not go, but I do intend to be there over the next few mornings. And I may do some live streaming while I'm there. Elaine Dent-Lingenfelter, we have you beat for once, Elaine. She says it's 6 Celsius in Texas and it's sleeting. Well, it's 7 Celsius here in the Boyne Valley tonight. Yay! We have a victory and it's not sleeting. Last time I looked out, the stars were shining. Patricia Pack, sorry, no, that's not what I meant to show. Made it and is taking a front seat closer to the buffet table. Yes, indeed, closer to the caviar. Not. Tom King was a little bit hasty with the count, but never mind. It's always good to see the enthusiastic students here, you know. Peter Woods is in Monaster Boyce. He's wishing me a Merry Solstice. And that's what I've been doing this year. And for several years now, I always say to people at this time of year, Happy Solstice and Merry Christmas. Because the solstice obviously comes first, both chronologically and, of course, historically. And Patricia wants to say hello to everyone around the world. Indeed, hello to all of you. Anna Liffey says, it's warm here tonight after last week. I haven't got the jumper on tonight. No need for it. Alan Hoskins is saying hello from the Clare Tip border. Hope all are well. Alan, does that do you sway between supporting Clare and Tip hurlers depending on who's doing well? I know, such a shocking thing to say. Wayne Bird says, good evening, Anthony. I hope you and everyone is well. Very heavy rain here in Birmingham. Well, that's an evening for the comfy chair and, you know, live Irish myths on the big TV and a can of something in your hand, you know, or a dram or a cuppa or something. John Main is wishing everyone a joyous holiday season. Enjoy the solstice and a new beginning full of love and happiness. Hope some of you can attend Sheed and Broga. Well, I am certainly hoping to do so from tomorrow morning. John, good to see you. And a very early afternoon it is on the west coast of the United States. Karen Byrne says, wish I was there. We'll do our best to bring some of it to you that can't be there. The full Irish Gary is saying, Giagach, Anthony, and the great and good to another day on the sod. Solstice banity to all. You omitted the word fine, Gary. This is not like you. Another fine day on the sod. The only time you don't say it's a fine day on the sod is when there's a hurricane. Very cold in San Francisco, only 3 Celsius. Looks like it's warmer in the Boyne Valley than it is in some of the states. Tonight, cold snap coming to Alabama, says Patricia. Brr. It's awfully, awfully cold in Burr. Never mind. Roy DeSoto is saying, howdy from California. Good afternoon, Roy. You're very welcome to the live stream. Auntie Joe says hello from cold Colorado. No snow is predicted, but Colorado weather is unpredictable. A little bit like Irish weather then, I suppose. Joe, it's great to see you. Hello from warm Phoenix, Arizona, says Judy. It's a beautiful 12 Celsius. Come here, listen. Don't be boasting about that now. Spread that around. You could easily give a degree or two to San Francisco. And I think you could spare one for Elaine in Texas. God love her. I joke, of course. You're very welcome, Judy. Thank you for joining us. Desiree Riley is in the house. Thank you for all the birthday wishes yesterday. Happy birthday to the wonderful Desiree. I hope you had a great day and you had a monstrous cake and whatever you're having afterwards, glass of prosecco maybe, or champagne or something nice. Miriam Eckhart is in the house. Caught another one again. Giorgich, Anthony, Tom King, and Tua. Miriam, you're very welcome. Great to see you and happy solstice. Greetings of the shortest days. Helen Hurst Chatter is in the house. Survived the blizzard in the Black Hills of South Dakota. The high today is minus 12 Celsius, dropping to minus 30 Wednesday night. Build yourself an igloo, Helen. Get yourself some warm gloves. Brendan Byrne is in Glendalough, and he has indulged himself with a Redbreast 15. Now, that is an indulgence. I only have a 12. I cannot possibly match that. Kaylee During is in the house. Good evening, Anthony. Hope you're well. Curator of the very famous and successful History with Kaylee YouTube channel. Barb Jordan. Enjoyed watching you on the prehistory, guys. Anthony says, Barb, thank you for that. I enjoyed that. That was good fun. I'd love to keep that conversation going, actually. Adina Sparks, always a joy, always great fun to be on with Michael and Rupert. Afternoon, Anthony, and all the Tua. Happy holidays, everyone. Looking forward to today's reading. So am I, Adina. This is very special. Andrea McCann Kinsella says, happy solstice, Anthony, and many happy returns. Andrea Banathy on Greenstad Mocharjigolair. Happy solstice, says Stephen O'Hara, and Christmas from a pleasantly mild Kilkenny. Brilliant stuff, Stephen. Yes, just when we thought we were in the grip of an Arctic mini ice age or something, it all melted and went away. That white landscape. By the way, if you want to see hoarfrost, please do have a look at the Mythical Ireland blog, where you, I don't know, maybe some of you didn't see that, but I know Facebook is very good at suppressing posts, links these days. So I'm going to share it here on the live, some pictures of the hoarfrost taken the other morning. I think that was Friday morning. And I did a live stream from Newgrange as well, and it was all on my own, and it was fabulous. It was beautiful. Ironically, it looks like it's going to be quite cloudy this week for the solstice winners who are going to be in the chamber for the first time since 2019. People are in the chamber. Very disappointingly, it looks like the beautiful sunrises we've had over the last week or so are a thing of the past, and it's going to be cloudy for the people going into the chamber. What can you do? Managed to catch you live again, says Susan Scott. Yay, greetings from Northwest Connecticut. Happy almost solstice and happy almost Christmas. Many happy returns, Susan. Great for you to be able to join us, and a great pleasure to see you here. And Miriam is going to a mead hall. Interesting. Yes. Save some of that for us, will you? Desiree's talking to Joe, Facebook user. It was so spectacular by the Boyne last week. I apologize for this. I've never been able to get Melanap to talk to the Mythical Ireland community on Facebook, even though the two of them are set up to talk to each other. Somebody is commenting, and I don't know who it is, and I'm going to find out. I am, he says, with utter determination. You just watch. I won't be able to find out. What's the bets? Okay. That's Gemma McGowan. Hello, Gemma. Gemma, a fellow Boyne Valley resident. Great to see you, and good evening to you. Marcia Downs is saying happy Yule solstice and Nullag Hunna. Love to all the Tua. Thank you, Marcia. You're very welcome. Many happy returns. Great to see you. Minus 11 to plus 14 in 2 days. Sure, everything will be grand, says Brendan. It actually didn't hit minus 11 here. It only went down to about minus 3 or 4. However, it was still very cold and icy. Hi all and Merry Christmas. That's Adrian Beglin. Adrian, a very good evening to yourself. And Karen, I hope you're all enjoying the long nights, short days. low sun. Actually, the sun has been spectacularly bright this past week or so, and made even more dazzling by the fact that the landscape was so white. Coming up exclusively for patrons tomorrow, hopefully, if I get the time, I'm just editing it at the moment, is footage, video, drone footage of the hoarfrost at Brunabonia over recent days. So you'll see the scrolling ticker at the bottom of the screen tells you how to become a patron at patreon.com/Mythical Ireland. A word to the YouTubers: if you're watching on YouTube, please do consider liking the video, the live stream, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon so you get notifications of when we are going live. Our last episode before Santa makes his appearance, says Elaine. Correct. A big deal this is. However, as I said, I will probably do a live stream or two from Newgrange over the next few mornings. That will be Facebook only because I haven't yet successfully managed to make Melon App happen when I'm out. But anyway, I hope you enjoy it. And of course, I will have, well, I aim to have the cameras with me, so plenty of photographs. A couple of things to say before we start. I didn't take a note, so I will try to remember them, which is not always a very clever thing to do, because sometimes when I finish live streaming, I then realize there was something very important that I hadn't said. One is, what is one? One is, I'm quite behind in correspondence. I have a lot of emails and Facebook messages, in particular, some Instagram messages as well to catch up on. If you've been trying to contact me in the past couple of weeks and you're finding me non-responsive, it's not because I'm ignorant or rude, and it's not because I don't care. It's simply because there aren't enough hours in the day. And I've been very busy, as well as work and Mythical Ireland and family. I've been also busy with the brass band. We've been playing quite a lot of gigs, as it were. We had our concert last Tuesday night, and we are playing Christmas carols at various locations, and we played at Mass on Sunday. And it's been a very, very busy period, and I just literally full up to the head with stuff. Anyway, the last of the money that was contributed to the GoFundMe campaign, the one that was called Let's Get Anthony Home, was handed over today, or shall I say transferred by bank transfer, to Drogheda Homeless Aid and the Drogheda Dolls. You may remember a few weeks ago, myself and Tom King handed over cheques worth €500 a piece, one to Drogheda Homeless Aid and one to Drogheda Dolls. Drogheda Dolls are raising money for 4 different charities. Well, there was a little bit more raised, and the balance has now been handed over. So those charities benefiting spectacularly, all thanks to the generosity of the Mythical Ireland community. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I'm sure I speak on Tom's behalf as well. Thank you from both of us for your wonderful generosity. And what a brilliant thing it is, because it has sparked all sorts of ideas. And next year, we're going to nominate some charities here in the Boyne Valley, and we're going to get the official Mythical Ireland community fundraiser going earlier next year. And we're going to try and raise as much money as possible. Drogheda Dolls are raising money for palliative care Louth, for So Sad, which is Save Our Sons and Daughters, a suicide awareness charity. The Drogheda Animal Rescue Centre, and the St. Nicholas's GFC Ladies Building. In addition, obviously, Drogheda Homeless Aid. So 5 charities based here locally are benefiting from your generosity. 1,000 thanks for your contributions. Thank you for your generosity. A few people are disappointed that the OPW announced that it is not hosting a live stream on the web this year of the solstice. There are very good reasons for that. The principal one being that it's not practical to have people in the chamber and do a live stream. So it's one or the other, really. They are, I believe they have said, they are not keeping an open mind, but they're planning on reviewing the thing for next year. But as of this year, no live stream, but lottery winners will be in the chamber each of the mornings. This morning, and including this morning, 5 mornings. So through until the 23rd, until Friday. So 10, I think it's 10 lottery winners at a time inside the chamber. Hopefully, some of them will get lucky and see the sun shining in there. This morning's winners didn't see any sunshine because it was extremely cloudy here in the Boyne Valley. So don't be shooting the messenger, please. Not my decision. I can understand people's disappointment. At the same time, as I say, there are very good practical reasons for it. It's kind of one or the other. You can't really do both. I have some other thoughts on that, which I'm going to discuss on News Talk. I'm being interviewed on Wednesday morning. That was supposed to be tomorrow morning, but it's been put off until the official day of solstice. If you're in Ireland, you can listen in on News Talk at 7 a.m. on the 21st, two mornings' time. Or if you're around the world, I believe that News Talk streams live on its website. And so we will be discussing the phenomenon of winter solstice and Newgrange and the importance of that. And keep an eye out for something else that myself and somebody are working on in the background to be released in the next 24 hours or so. Anyway, that's all I can say. That's all I have to say about that. To quote the great Forrest Gump. Chungus Khan is delighted to have made it. Yay! Thank you for joining us. Sandra Boothroyd. Oh yes, cold. It's suddenly warm in Ireland again after all of that. It's funny. The ice melted very quickly in the end, and we went from -3 on Saturday night to +13 yesterday. There you go. You're such a man of mystery, Anthony. I don't know who it is that's saying that, but I'm about to find out. No, I'm not, because I can't see who said it. So I apologize, whoever you are. You're a person of mystery now, because I don't know who you are. Yes, indeed. Yes. A very interesting project that I'm sort of only peripherally involved in. Hoping that it will be released on the Mythical Ireland website tomorrow, late tomorrow, hopefully. Something interesting and exciting, something new, something old, but something new, as it were. Anyway, let us get on with the show. I'm trying to remember if that is all the announcements that have to be made. I hope you've all got your Christmas shopping done, folks. It's a bit stressful out there. At the weekend, people were driving around Drogheda like there was no tomorrow, not letting people out at junctions and roundabouts and all sorts of rude behaviour. Of course, that wasn't me. I was the one giving them the finger. No, I'm only joking. Perhaps people realising that it was the last full weekend before the festive weekend. Christmas is on a Sunday this year. But anyway, I just saw on the news that a man has discovered how to do origami backwards. More on this story as it unfolds. Moving swiftly on. Yes, indeed. We are reading tonight from Sir James George Frazer's The Golden Bough. What is The Golden Bough? Well, Time magazine described it as one of the 20th century's most influential books, first published in 1922, a century ago, almost a century ago. Yes, Anthony, 2022 minus 1922 is definitely 100, by the Macmillan Publishing Company. Really what it is an anthropological study, a study of mythological, folkloric customs and traditions from various nations and comparing them. And it does actually shed some light on some of our mythology here in Ireland. A remarkable study. This is funny, right? Because this is a volume that runs to over 800 pages. It's a substantial tome. This is an abridged version of what was published originally, which came out in the form of several books. I want to read this first paragraph because I find this fascinating. This is Frazer writing in his own words. The The primary aim of this book is to explain the remarkable rule which regulated the succession to the priesthood of Diana at Aricia. When I first set myself to solve the problem more than 30 years ago, I thought that the solution could be propounded very briefly. But I soon found that to render it probable or even intelligible, it was necessary to discuss certain more general questions, some of which had hardly been broached before. In successive editions, the discussion of these and kindred topics has occupied more and more space. The inquiry has branched out in more and more directions until 2 volumes of the original work have expanded into 12. 12 volumes originally, people. 12 volumes. Meanwhile, a wish has often been expressed that the book should be issued in a more compendious form. This abridgment is an attempt to meet the wish and thereby to bring the work within the range of a wider circle of readers. So I'd love to have the original 12, and that's something that I may put on the wish list. Dear Santa, do you think maybe it's perhaps just a tad little bit late for me to be saying, Dear Santa, can I have all original 12 volumes of Sir James George Frazer's study, The Golden Bough? Any late comers that we have to say hello to? Oh, Archaeoastronomy Database. Unusually late. But of course, it's the solstice. It's that time of year when, the sun is late in the mornings, I just made it. I'm looking forward to winter solstice in a few more days, as we all are. And then the year turns. And then we're into, well, very gradually, folks. Don't get too excited. We are looking towards longer days. Brenda Byrne, that is a lovely comment. Thank you for bringing together such an interesting and lovely group of people. If I was stranded on a desert island, this is the group I would want to be with. Fantastic. Wow. There isn't a better recommendation than that. A lot of people laughing, which I presume was at my quote-unquote joke. The Golden Bough describes our ancestors, I'm reading from the back cover, our ancestors' primitive methods of worship, sex practices, strange rituals, and festivals, disproving the popular thought that primitive life was simple. This monumental survey shows that savage man was enmeshed in a tangle of magic, taboos, and superstitions. I even despise that word, savage man. But anyway, Young and Campbell are the ones to read in relation to calling somebody savage. Revealed here is the evolution of man from savagery to civilization. Some would say man is just as savage as ever, and in fact more so if you look at the damage being done to the planet. However, I'll move on. From the modification of his weird and often bloodthirsty customs to the entry of lasting moral, ethical, and spiritual values. Sir James Frazer left a lasting mark on science, literature, and the history of Western thought, says Time magazine. And this is from Professor M.F. Ashley Montagu. Frazer's The Golden Bough is one of the great books of our culture, written by one of the great scholars of our time. To read it is to share in the adventure of mankind's cultural odyssey and to undergo an enlargement in one's own sympathy and understanding for one's fellow beings. It is a book to be read and reread. And the last one is a short quote from Nature. I presume that's the journal Nature. One of the greatest books. There you go. So I'm going to read from chapter 24, which is called The Killing of the Divine King. And there are several sections, or what you might call mini chapters, in there. I'm going to just progress through this and we'll see how we get on. I'll probably make a few episodes of this. Unfortunately, actually, I must identify whether it is in copyright still or not, because that would mean we could read more of it. Anyway, we will find out. Oh, we have a spammer. Okay. One moment, please, folks. While I boot said spammer out of the room. Yep. That's what happens, live TV and all that. Hopefully that'll... If you see somebody offering you readings and looking for friend requests, please report them to Facebook. It's not as easy to ban people, I don't think, on Facebook as it is on YouTube. Anyway, Anne McCallum, I wasn't late, Anthony. In fact, I was early, but for some reason I couldn't post my comment. Finally managed to post a couple, and now one to you. That's perfectly okay, Anne. What temperature is it in Ontario right now, by the way? Yvette Tillema is in the house saying hello to Desiree. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Desiree. Happy birthday to you. From all of us, happy birthday. Belated, I know. Kira on the Mythical Ireland community says Frazer was one of the godfathers in anthropology. However, some of his theories are seen as somewhat dated. Funnily enough, they say the same about T.F. O'Reilly. It's a funny thing. That was Gemma McGowan saying you're such a man of mystery. Yes, indeed. Nevertheless, a classic. Maynooth Library in MU should house all volumes of his work, says Kira. Interesting, actually. I may have to get myself down there one of these days. You might have missed your calling as a lounge singer, says Marcia. I'll take that as a compliment. I'm not sure that's how it was meant, but, let's get going, shall we? Before Anthony breaks out in either another terrible joke or another terrible round of singing. Ireland is warm. I'm ready to continue the myth conversation there. Brilliant stuff. Valerie Gallagher is in a crisp and windy Rhode Island. A very good evening to you, Valerie. You're very welcome, and we shall get on with the show. We're just starting, so perfectly on time. You're very welcome, Desiree. And sure, look, many more of them to you. So the first subsection of the chapter, 24, the chapter is called The Killing of the Divine King. The first subsection is subsection 1 or subchapter 1, The Mortality of the Gods. Laura Inkyfinger says it's minus 24 in Alberta, minus 34 with the wind chill. Oh my God, that's freezing. By the way, do you know that the inventor of the wind chill factor passed away the other day? He was 84, but he felt like 70. Stop laughing at your own jokes, Anthony. Man has created... excuse me, I'm expecting a flurry of face palms now on the comments. Laura, you're very welcome. Man has created gods in his own likeness, and being himself mortal, he has naturally supposed his creatures to be in the same sad predicament. Thus, the Greenlanders believe that a wind could kill their most powerful god, and that he would certainly die if he touched a dog. When they heard of the Christian God, they kept asking if he never died, and being informed that he did not, they were much surprised and said he must be a very great God indeed. In answer to the inquiries of Colonel Dodge, a North American Indian stated that the world was made by the Great Spirit. Being asked which Great Spirit he meant, the good one or the bad one? Oh, neither of them, replied he. Quote, the Great Spirit that made this world is dead long ago. He could not possibly have lived as long as this, unquote. A tribe in the Philippine Islands told the Spanish conquerors that the grave of the Creator was upon the top of Mount Kabunian. Hatsi Ibib, please forgive my pronunciations if they're bad. Karen apparently loves my jokes. Well, Karen, form a queue. It's a very short queue, and right now there's only one person in it. Thank you very much. Yes. Somebody's saying hello to... oh, there you go. There's Margaret. Happy solstice eve to you, Margaret. And yes, indeed, I hope it's not too cold up there in Cavan. Hetzi Ibib, a god or divine hero of the Hottentots, died several times and came back to life again. His graves are generally to be met within is spelt as two words here. Somebody wasn't doing the proofreading properly. Within narrow defiles between mountains. When the Hottentots pass one of them, they throw a stone on it for good luck, sometimes muttering, quote, "Give us plenty of cattle," unquote. Now, folks, if you don't see the similarities there, the notion of throwing a stone on a dead god's grave, wow, sounds just like a cairn. Give us plenty of cattle. Well, look, Neolithic and farming and all of that, Newgrange. Ooh, we are speculating, of course, but we will point out the similarities where they are. Margaret usually teaches tonight but has no class. Well, lucky for us. Judy McQueen says hello from Oregon. Hello, Judy. A very good afternoon to you. Cairn Building says Valerie. Yes, absolutely right. The grave of Zeus, the great god of Greece, was shown to visitors in Crete as late as about the beginning of our era. The body of Dionysos was buried at Delphi beside the golden statue of Apollo, and his tomb bore the inscription, here lies Dionysus, dead, the son of Semele. According to one account, Apollo himself was buried at Delphi, for Pythagoras is said to have carved an inscription on his tomb, setting forth how the god had been killed by the python and buried under the tripod. The great gods of Egypt themselves were not exempt from the common lot. They too grew old and died. But when at a later time the discovery of the art of embalming gave a new lease of life to the souls of the dead by preserving their bodies for an indefinite time from corruption, the deities were permitted to share the benefit of an invention which held out to gods as well as to men a reasonable hope of immortality. To which loads of the ladies are saying, "What about the women?" Every province then had the tomb and mummy of its dead god. The mummy of Osiris was to be seen at Mendes. Thinis boasted of the mummy of Anhuri. The Heliopolis rejoiced in the possession of that of Tumu. The high gods of Babylon also, though they appeared to their worshippers only in dreams and visions, were conceived to be human in their bodily shape, human in their passions, and human in their fate. For like men, they were born into the world, and like men, they loved and fought and died. And that leads us into section 2, which is called Kings Killed When Their Strength Fails. Chungus Khan thinks this is amazing, saying, "Wow, wow, wow," and amazing in capital letters. I agree, actually, it is fast. I told you, this is a landmark book. You cannot be without it. If you're remotely interested in mythology and comparative mythology, you have to have it. I've had mine since, I actually didn't put the date on it. I probably have had this for about 20 years, at least. Let me see. I'm going to pass out. This is priceless, says Junks. Calm. Tell you what, lie down, flatten your back. Take some deep breaths while you're listening. You'll be grand. And on we shall go. If the high gods who dwell remote from the fret and fever of this earthly life are yet believed to die at last, it is not to be expected that a god who lodges in a frail tabernacle of flesh should escape the same fate. Though we hear of African kings who have imagined themselves immortal by virtue of their sorceries. Now, primitive peoples, as we have seen, and I dislike the word primitive, but we shall move on. This is written a century ago, remember? Sometimes believe that their safety and even that of the world is bound up with the life of one of these god-men or human incarnations of the divinity. By the way, consider for a moment, just for a moment, consider the notion that the man buried in Newgrange, whose parents were first-degree incestuous partners, were brother and sister probably, may well have been seen in the Neolithic as one of these god kings, and Newgrange his grave. Just consider it. Don't rule it out. Naturally, therefore, they take the utmost care of his life out of a regard for their own. But no amount of care and precaution would prevent the man god from growing old and feeble and at last dying. His worshippers have to lay their account with this sad necessity and to meet it as best they can. The danger is a formidable one. For if the course of nature is dependent on the man god's life, what catastrophes may not be expected from the gradual enfeeblement of his powers and their final extinction in death? There is only one way of averting these dangers. The man god must be killed as soon as he shows symptoms that his powers are beginning to fail, and his soul must be transferred to a vigorous successor before it has been seriously impaired by the threatened decay. Fascinating stuff. The advantages of thus putting the man god to death instead of allowing him to die of old age and disease are, to the savage, obvious enough. For if the man god dies what we call a natural death, it means, according to the savage, that his soul has either voluntarily departed from his body and refuses to return, or more commonly, that it has been extracted or at least detained in its wanderings by a demon or sorcerer. In any of these cases, the soul of the man god is lost to his worshippers, and with it, their prosperity is gone and their very existence endangered. Now, immediately, we're seeing the links here with Irish high kings, in particular in the early medieval period, when we have the historical record of the kings, less so the pre-Christian or prehistoric, where it becomes much more shadowy in terms of what can be said factually. But that the king, it's a tradition that goes right back to the earliest mythology about kingship, that the king should not be blemished. And if the king was blemished, he had to abdicate. And of course, we're thinking here too about the bog bodies, those people of high status that were, by all means, or by all the evidence visible on what remains of them, that they were sacrificed. Desiree, yes, I think it's early days yet. I think that Coda may well give us a yelp or a bark or two before too long. Even if they could arrange to catch the soul of the dying god as it left his lips or his nostrils and to transfer it to a successor, this would not affect their purpose. For, dying of disease, his soul would necessarily have his body in the last, sorry, his soul would necessarily leave his body in the last stage of weakness and exhaustion. And so enfeebled, it would continue to drag out a languid, inert existence in any body to which it might be transferred. Whereas by slaying him, his worshippers could, in the first place, make sure of catching his soul as it escaped and transferring it to a suitable successor. And in the second place, by putting him to death before his natural force was abated. They would secure that the world should not fall into decay with the decay of the man god. Every purpose, therefore, was answered and all dangers averted by thus killing the man god and transferring his soul while yet at its prime to a vigorous successor. Can you imagine in one of these antiquated societies where the would-be king is being chosen and everybody goes, "Hello, it's you, Brian the king." And Brian goes, "Yes, I'm honored, wonderful." And in the back of his mind, he's going, "Shit, they could kill me at any minute, like if I get sick, if I get chicken pox or something, if I get the COVID, they could hack me head off, I don't think you'd be quite so enthusiastic about taking the kingship if you knew that your people could kill you at a turn. Auntie T says, "I first read The Golden Bough more than 40 years ago. Sadly, I lost my original copy." Isn't it a wonderful, wonderful piece of work? Really incredible. Karen Faye O'Loughlin is saying hello from a windy Boulder, Colorado. Sorry to be late. No brown zone. No need for apologies. Life is life, and we're all busy. You're very welcome. The mystic kings of fire and water in Cambodia are not allowed to die a natural death. Hence, when one of them is seriously ill and the elders think that he cannot recover, they stab him to death. How wonderfully gruesome. The people of Congo believed, as we have seen, that if their pontiff is an interesting word, isn't it? Their pope, the Chitome, were to die a natural death, the world would perish, and the earth, which he alone sustained by his power and merit, would immediately be annihilated. Wow. Imagine living under that kind of cosh. Strange. A Monty Python sketch in the making, says Brendan. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Desiree says, if the crops fail or plague comes, I'm going to be thrown in the big. Funny enough, in this case, Desiree, it's the men apparently who are to blame. It all seems to be about kings, about male regents, male sovereigns, not female. So you're safe. It's grand. Accordingly, when he fell ill and seemed likely to die, the man who was destined to be his successor entered the pontiff's house with a rope or a club and strangled or clubbed him to death. Wow. The Ethiopian kings of Meroe were worshipped as gods, but whenever the priests chose, they sent a messenger to the king, ordering him to die and alleging an oracle of the gods as their authority for the command. This command the kings always obeyed down to the reign of Ergomenes, a contemporary of Ptolemy II, king of Egypt. Having received a Greek education which emancipated him from the superstitions of his countrymen, Ergomenes ventured to disregard the command of the priests and, entering the Golden Temple with a body of soldiers, put the priests to the sword. Interesting. For once, it's not the woman's fault, says Desiree. Margaret says, I really wouldn't want to be king if that was the job description. And for some reason, Tom King says he's getting worried. It's only your name, Tom. It's Mock Henri. Thomas Mock Henri. Tom, the king of the king. Sorry, Tom, the son of the king. Yeah. Just say you're the Ongawa. If anybody says, does anybody know where Tom King is? No, I haven't a clue. I'm Ongawa. I think I would claim gender equality now, says Brendan. Yes, indeed. Mind you, havoc in the Temple of Doom, says Michael Trott. Good morning, Michael. Yes, we are, of course, assuming gender here. Customs of the same sort appear to have prevailed in this part of Africa down to modern times. In some tribes of Fazokul, Fazoql, I have no idea whether I'm pronouncing that correctly or not, the king had to administer justice daily under a certain tree. If from sickness or any other cause he was unable to, I wonder, was that like the Billa, the sacred tree of Ireland? He was unable to discharge his duty for 3 whole days. He was hanged on the tree in a noose, which contained 2 razors, so arranged that when the noose was drawn tight by the weight of the king's body, they cut his throat. Humans, huh? Strange. A custom of putting their divine kings to death at the first symptoms of infirmity or old age prevailed until lately, if indeed it is even now extinct and not merely dormant among the Shilluk of the White Nile, and in recent years it has been carefully investigated by Dr. C.G. Seligman. The reference which the Shilluk pay to their king, the reverence which the Shilluk pay to their king appears to arise chiefly from the conviction that he is a reincarnation of the spirit of Nyakang, the semi-divine hero who founded the dynasty and settled the tribe in their present territory. It is a fundamental article of the Shilluk Creed that the spirit of the divine or semi-divine Nyakang is incarnate in the reigning king, who is accordingly himself invested to some extent with the character of a divinity. But while the Shilluk hold their kings in high, indeed religious reverence, and take every precaution against their accidental death, nevertheless they cherish, quote, the conviction that the king must not be allowed to become ill or senile, lest, with his diminishing vigour, the cattle should sicken and fail to bear their increase, the crops should rot in the fields, and man, stricken with disease, should die in ever increasing numbers, unquote. To prevent these calamities, it used to be the regular custom with the Shilluk to put the king to death whenever he showed signs of ill health or failing strength. What if he only had a cold or a hangover? Like it was a temporary passing thing, you know? You know? I'm not dead! He will be in a minute. I've already got a cold! Yes. One of the fatal symptoms of decay was taken to be an incapacity to satisfy the sexual passions of his wives, of whom he has very many, distributed in a large number of houses at Fashoda. I think it would be best for me not to comment on that. When this ominous weakness manifested itself, erectile dysfunction, as it were, the wives reported it to the chiefs, who are popularly said to have intimated to the king his doom by spreading a white cloth over his face and knees as he lay slumbering in the heat of the sultry afternoon. Execution soon followed the sentence of death. A hut was specially built for the occasion. The king was led into it and lay down with his head resting on the lap of a nubile virgin. The door of the hut was then walled up, and the couple was left without food, water, or fire to die of hunger and suffocation. Sue Pranter is commenting on the wonderful expressions. I'm trying to cook, but I keep having to refer to the screen. Whoo! Yes. So the death sentence is passed when the king is unable to satisfy his several dozen wives. This was the old custom, but it was abolished some 5 generations ago. Remember, this was written 100 years ago, so we're probably only talking about something that was abolished in 2 or 3 centuries ago. Sorry, I'll read that again. This was the old custom, but it was abolished some 5 generations ago on account of the excessive sufferings of one of the kings who perished in this way. Well, I mean, it doesn't matter about the excessive sufferings. It's a nasty thing to do, full stop. It is said that the chiefs announce his fate to the king and that afterwards he is strangled in a hut which has been specially built for the occasion. Oh yeah, that's so much better. Strangle him and get it over and done with quickly. From Dr. Seligman's inquiries, it appears that not only was the Shilluk king liable to be killed with due ceremony at the first symptoms of incipient decay, but even while he was yet in the prime of health and strength, he might be attacked at any time by a rival and have to defend his crown in a combat to the death. According to the common Shilluk tradition, any son of a king had the right thus to fight the king in possession and, if he succeeded in killing him, to reign in his stead. As every king had a large harem and many sons, the number of possible candidates for the throne at any time may well have been not inconsiderable, and the reigning monarch must have carried his life in his hand. No thanks, folks. Not for me. I wouldn't be king. Nope. I would rather be a peasant, thank you. But the attack on him could only take place with any prospect of success at night, for during the day the king surrounded himself with his friends and bodyguards, and an aspirant to the throne could hardly hope to cut his way through them and strike home, unless his name was Lionel Messi, of whom it was once said that you could put a tarantula in his shorts and he would still be cool. Anyway, I diverge from the path. It was otherwise at night. For then the guards were dismissed, and the king was alone in his enclosure with his favourite wives. It's not enough that he has a harem of wives, he also has favourites. And there was no man near to defend him except a few herdsmen, whose huts stood a little way off. The hours of darkness were therefore the season of peril for the king. It is said that he used to pass them in constant watchfulness, prowling round his huts fully armed, peering into the blackest shadows, or himself standing silent and alert like a sentinel on duty in some dark corner. When at last his rival appeared, the fight would take place in grim silence, broken only by the clash of spears and shields, for it was a point of honour with the king not to call the herdsmen to his assistance. Wow, bloody hell. Just catching up on some of the comments. Miriam says, I think it's in a way it's fair because of the power he's given. Need to read the small print for that job, says Brendan. It's getting hot in there, Tom, says Tara. And Valerie agrees with Miriam. Power balanced. Miriam says, yep, heck no to all that. I'll be a stable hand. Could you imagine if it was like that for rulers now, says Desiree? Yes, King Charles watching himself that night for a sudden attack from one of his sons or something. Regicide is not belonging to the right union. It all sounds like sort of something foreign and very distant and strange, doesn't it? Like Nayakang himself, their founder, each of the Shilluk kings after death is worshipped at a shrine, which is erected over his grave, and the grave of a king is always in the village where he was born. The tomb shrine of a king resembles the shrine of Nayakang, consisting of a few huts enclosed by a fence. One of the huts is built over the king's grave, and others are occupied by the guardians of the shrine. Indeed, the shrines of Nayakang and the shrines of the kings are scarcely to be distinguished from each other, and the religious rituals observed at all of them are identical in form and vary only in matters of detail. There's Coda now, Desiree. The variations being due apparently to the far greater sanctity attributed to the shrines of Nayakang. Pardon me for a moment. Well, he's barking now, that's for sure. They're usually... Sorry. The grave shrines of the kings are tended by certain old men or women who correspond to the guardians of the shrines of Nayakang. They're usually widows or old men servants of the deceased king, and when they die, they are succeeded in their office by their descendants. Moreover, cattle are dedicated to the grave shrines of the kings, and sacrifices are offered at them, just as at the shrines of Nayakang. Amadeus, hello Amadeus, is whining back at the TV with tail wagging. He knows he was waiting. Yes, it was going to happen before too long. In general, the principal element in the religion of the Shilluk would seem to be the worship which they pay to their sacred or divine kings, whether dead or alive. These are believed to be animated by a single divine spirit, which has been transmitted from the semi-mythical, but probably in substance historical, founder of the dynasty through all his successors to the present day. Hence, regarding their kings as incarnate divinities on whom the welfare of men, of cattle, and of the corn implicitly depends, the Shilluk naturally pay them the greatest respect and take every care of them. And however strange it may seem to us, their custom of putting the divine king to death as soon as he shows signs of ill health or failing strength springs directly from their profound veneration for him and from their anxiety to preserve him, or rather the divine spirit by which he is animated, in the most perfect state of efficiency. Nay, we may go further and say that their practice of regicide is the best proof they can give of the high regard in which they hold their kings, which all makes it entirely excusable to murder him in the most gruesome way possible. I think Desiree Coda was obviously barking happy birthday to you, which is why he was taking so long. Yes, Patricia makes an interesting point, which is no wonder the king had difficulties, if he had to spend the whole night looking over his shoulder, expecting at any moment to be assassinated. Very true. In a constant state of heightened anxiety. For they believe, as we have seen, that the king's life or spirit is so sympathetically bound up with the prosperity of the whole country that if he fell ill or grew senile, the cattle would sicken and cease to multiply, the crops would rot in the fields, and men would perish of widespread disease. So, again, there are similarities here with the beliefs in medieval Ireland around the king not being blemished. And that blemish could be man made, as in. He could receive an injury in battle, like Nuadu, or he could have his eye stabbed out, which is a thing that the kings did to other kings' sons, or he could get a disease or some other malady and be seen to decline. Hence, in their opinion, the only way of averting these calamities is to put the king to death while he is still hale and hearty, in order that the divine spirit, pardon me, which he has inherited from his predecessors, may be transmitted in turn to him by his successor, while it is still in full vigour and has not yet been impaired by the weakness of disease and old age. I wonder what they made of situations where their king died of a sudden cardiac arrest or an aneurysm or something to cause him to pass very quickly and suddenly. In this connection, the particular symptom which is commonly said to seal the king's death warrant is highly significant. When he can no longer satisfy the passions of his numerous wives. In other words, when he has ceased, whether partially or wholly, to be able to reproduce his kind, it is time for him to die and to make room for a more vigorous successor. Taken along with the other reasons which are alleged for putting the king to death, this one suggests that the fertility of men, of cattle, and of the crops is believed to depend sympathetically on the generative power of the king, so that the complete failure of that power in him would involve a corresponding failure in men, animals, and plants, and would thereby entail at no distant date the entire extinction of all life, whether human, animal, or vegetable. Fascinating stuff. No wonder that with such a danger before their eyes, the Shilluk should be most careful not to let the king die what we should call a natural death of sickness or old age. It is characteristic of their attitude towards the death of the kings that they refrain from speaking of it as death. They do not say that a king has died, but simply that he has, quote, gone away, unquote, like his divine ancestors, Nyakang and Dag, the two first kings of the dynasty, both of whom are reported not to have died, but to have disappeared. The similar legends of the mysterious disappearance of early kings in other lands, for example, at Rome and in Uganda, may well point to a similar custom of putting them to death for the purpose of preserving their life. On the whole, the theory and practice of the divine kings of the Shilluk correspond very nearly to the theory and practice of the priests of Nemi, the kings of the wood, if my view of the latter is correct. In both, we see a series of divine kings on whose life the fertility of men, of cattle, and of vegetation is believed to depend, and who are put to death, whether in single combat or otherwise, in order that their divine spirit may be transmitted to their successors in full vigour, uncontaminated by the weakness and decay of sickness or old age, because any such degeneration on the part of the king would, in the opinion of his worshippers, entail a corresponding degeneration on mankind, on cattle, and on the crops. Some points in this explanation of the custom of putting divine kings to death, particularly the method of transmitting their divine souls to their successors, will be dealt with more fully in the sequel. Meantime, we pass to other examples of the general practice. The Dinka are a congeries of independent tribes, that congeries word meaning a jumble, in the valley of the White Nile. They are essentially a pastoral people, passionately devoted to the care of their numerous herds of oxen, though they also keep sheep and goats, and the women cultivate small quantities of millet and sesame. For their crops, and above all for their pastures, they depend on the regularity of the rains. In seasons of prolonged drought, they are said to be reduced to great extremities. Hence, the rainmaker is a very important personage among them to this day. Indeed, the men in authority, whom travellers dub chiefs or sheiks, are in fact the actual or potential rainmakers of the tribe or community. Each of them is believed to be animated by the spirit of a great rainmaker, which has come down to him through a succession of rainmakers. And in virtue of this inspiration, a successful rainmaker enjoys very great power and is consulted on all important matters. Yet, in spite, or rather in virtue, of the high honour in which he is held, no Dinka rainmaker is allowed to die a natural death of sickness or old age. For the Dinka believe that if such an untoward event were to happen, the tribe would suffer from disease and famine, and the herds would not yield their increase. So when a rainmaker feels that he is growing old and infirm, he tells his children that he wishes to die. Among the Agar Dinka, a large grave is dug, and the rainmaker lies down in it, surrounded by his friends and relatives. From time to time, he speaks to the people, recalling the past history of the tribe, reminding them how he has ruled and advised them, and instructing them how they are to act in the future. Then, when he has concluded his admonition, he bids them cover him up. So the earth is thrown down on him as he lies in the grave, and he soon dies of suffocation. What an appalling way to go. Such, with minor variations, appears to be the regular end of the honourable career of the rainmaker in all the Dinka tribes. The Khor Adar Dinka told Dr. Seligman that when they have dug the grave for their rainmaker, they strangle him in his house. The father and paternal uncle of one of Dr. Seligman's informants had both been rainmakers, and both had been killed in the most regular and orthodox fashion. Even if a rainmaker is quite young, he will be put to death should he seem likely to perish of disease. Further, every precaution is taken to prevent a rainmaker from dying an accidental death, for such an end, though not nearly so serious as a matter of death from illness or old age, would be sure to entail sickness on the tribe. As soon as a rainmaker is killed, his valuable spirit is supposed to pass to a suitable successor, whether a son or other near blood relation. I'm going to pause for a moment, catch up with the comments. Bloody hell. Yes, indeed. Amazing stuff, isn't it? The things that were considered normal and natural. Yeah. I'm the rainmaker and I don't feel too well. Dig me a grave there, and I'm going to lie down with my family and friends. I'm going to tell a few stories, and then you're going to cover me in earth and suffocate me. No thanks. In the Central African kingdom of Bunyoro, down to recent years, custom required that as soon as the king fell seriously ill or began to break up from old age, sorry, it doesn't say old, it just says from age, to break up from age, he should die by his own hand. For, according to an old prophecy, the throne would pass away from the dynasty if ever the king were to die a natural death. He killed himself by draining a poisoned cup. If he faltered or were too ill to ask for the cup, it was his wife's duty to administer the poison. When the king of Kibanga on the upper Congo seems near his end, the sorcerers put a rope around his neck, which they draw gradually tighter till he dies. If the king of Gingiro happens to be wounded in war, he is put to death by his comrades, or if they fail to kill him, by his kinsfolk, however hard he may beg for mercy. They say they do it that he may not die by the hands of his enemies. The Jukos, Jukos, are a heathen tribe of the Benue River, a great tributary of the Niger. In their country, quote, the town of Gatry is ruled by a king who is elected by the big men of the town as follows. When, in the opinion of the big men, the king has reigned long enough, they give out that, quote, this is a quote inside a quote, quote, the king is sick, unquote, a formula understood by all to mean that they're going to kill him, though the intention is never put more plainly. They then decide who is to be the next king. How long is he is to reign is settled by the influential men at a meeting. The question is put and answered by each man throwing on the ground a little piece of stick for each year he thinks the new king should rule. The king is then told, and a great feast prepared at which the king gets drunk on guinea corn beer. After that, he is speared, and the man who was chosen becomes king. Thus, each Juko king knows that he cannot have very many more years to live, and that he is certain of his predecessor's fate. Strange. This, however, does not seem to frighten candidates. The same custom of king killing is said to prevail at Kwande and Wakari as well as at Gatry. Unquote. And that was a long quote. In the three Hausa kingdoms of Gobir, Katsina, and Daura in northern Nigeria, as soon as a king showed signs of failing health or growing infirmity, an official who bore the title Killer of the Elephant appeared and throttled him. Nasty stuff. I know there are a lot of people today who say we wish we could do the same to some of our political leaders. I do not agree. Surely we've moved on from all this savagery. Donna Ferrer is in the house. Hello there. Welcome to the live stream. Desiree says, crazy. Mrs. Penny jokingly calls me the rain bringer. Since I moved here, we have had more rain in a year than they had in the last 10 combined. I don't think I'll mention to her this custom. Guinea corn beer, Guinness, this Chungus can. Well, look, I mean, if you're going to spear me, if I know you're going to kill me, might as well get locked, and have a laugh just before it happens, Go down laughing, go down drunk, The Matiamvo is a great king or emperor in the interior of Angola. One of the inferior kings of the country, by name Chala, gave to a Portuguese expedition the following account of the manner in which the Matiamvo comes by his end. Quote, it has been customary, unquote, he said, open quote again, for our Matiamvos to die either in war or by a violent death. And the present Matiamvo must meet this last fate, as, in consequence of his great exactions, he has lived long enough. When we come to this understanding, and decide that he should be killed, we invite him to make war with our enemies, on which occasion we all accompany him and his family to war, when we lose some of our people. If he escapes unhurt, we return to the war again and fight for 3 or 4 days. We then suddenly abandon him and his family to their fate, leaving them in the enemy's hands. Well, very nice of you altogether. Seeing himself thus deserted, he causes his throne to be erected and, sitting down, calls his family around him. He then orders his mother to approach. She kneels at his feet. He first cuts off her head, then decapitates his sons in succession, next his wives and relatives, and, last of all, his most beloved wife, called Anakulo. This slaughter being accomplished, the Matiamvo, dressed in all his pomp, awaits his own death, which immediately follows by an officer sent by the powerful neighbouring chiefs, Kanikwina and Kanika. I think this episode definitely needs to come with a health warning, doesn't it? Bloody hell. This officer first cuts off his legs and arms at the joints, and lastly he cuts off his head. There's a quote coming to mind. It's really not funny. 'Tis only a flesh wound. After which the head of the officer is struck off. Oh God, even the guy who kills the king is killed. Mad stuff. All the potentates retire from the encampment in order not to witness his death. It is my duty to remain and witness. Sorry. Yes. That's what it says. It is my duty to remain and witness his death, and to mark the place where the head and arms have been deposited by the two great chiefs, the enemies of the Matiamvo. They also take possession of all the property belonging to the deceased monarch and his family, which they convey to their own residence. Wow. I then provide for the funeral of the mutilated remains of the late Matiamvo, after which I retire to his capital and proclaim the new government. I then return to where the head, legs, and arms have been deposited, and for 40 slaves, I ransom them, together with the merchandise and other property belonging to the deceased, which I give up to the new Matiamvo, who has been proclaimed. This is what has happened to many Matiamvos, and what must happen to the present one, unquote. So it also seems that one thing that we must bear in mind in all this is the things that are absolutely considered deplorably horrific to the modern mind, or at least to the modern Western mind, but which were considered par for the course and entirely normal in I wouldn't say savage, but it is quite savage in a way, but in pre-literate or pre-modern societies. We can never assume for a moment, and I think this is a mistake of some of the people who are inclined to go, for instance, to Newgrange on Wednesday morning and sing and dance and think about all the goody, happy, clappy stuff. We cannot rule out the possibility that in prehistoric society in Ireland, that certain customs were not also in fashion. We can't for a moment. Chungus says gruesome and awesome in the same sentence. So how did we ever get the expression "it's good to be king"? Says Helen. Well, I think, yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's a tough gig, says Kathleen. You're not wrong there. Miriam says, I mean, there's something to be said for internal population control. Well, I don't know. Yeah. Some political leaders create more savagery than that. That is true. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, entirely innocent people are the victims. It appears to have been a Zulu custom to put the king to death as soon as he began to have wrinkles or grey hairs. Oh, God. Some people grey very soon in life. At least this seems implied in the following passage written by one who resided for some time at the court of the notorious Zulu tyrant Chaka in the early part of the 19th century. And there is a quote coming, but it reminds me of a gentleman that I know who in his teens and up until the age of about 20 had jet black hair, and in the first few years of his 20s he went grey. It just all washed away. All the black turned to grey. He was very young to go grey, almost white-haired, you know. Who would be a king in these societies, eh? You know, it's a grey hair. You know, you'd want to make sure you had plenty of just for men bottles available in those days to cover up your greys. By the way, I call my greys my wisdom hairs. That's what I call them. Brendan Burns says, how come that ancient people separated by the four corners of the earth, the earth being a globe, never mind, that's a stupid joke, all came to the same conclusion that if things are not going well, chop off the head of our leader? Yes, and in France, they did literally that with the guillotine, didn't they? And this is the quote: the extraordinary violence of the king's rage with me was mainly occasioned by that absurd nostrum, the hair oil, with the notion of which Mr. Farewell had impressed him as being a specific for removing all indications of age, the aforementioned just for men coming to mind. From the first moment of his having heard that such a preparation was attainable, he evinced a solicitude to procure it, and on every occasion never forgot to remind us of his anxiety respecting it. More especially on our departure on the mission, his injunctions were particularly directed to this subject. It will be seen that it was one of the barbarous one of the barbarous customs of the Zulus in their choice or election of their kings, that he must neither have wrinkles nor grey hairs, as they are both distinguishing marks of disqualification for becoming a monarch of a warlike people. It is also equally indispensable that their king should never exhibit those proofs of having become unfit and incompetent to reign. It is therefore important that they should conceal these indications so long as they possibly can. Just for men, Chaka had become greatly apprehensive of the approach of grey hairs, which would at once be the signal for him to prepare to make his exit from this sublunary world, it being always followed by the death of the monarch. Unquote. The writer to whom we are indebted for this instructive anecdote of the hair oil omits to specify the mode in which a grey-haired and wrinkled Zulu chief would used, quote, to make his exit from this sublunary world, unquote, but an analogy we may conjecture that he was killed. Yes. Arcastronomy Database says, in a society where the king was able to obtain enough power, he could probably end or at least defer this custom. Possibly. I think I'd shave my head, says Desiree. Yes. Then he could perpetuate his power further and further as the balance of power continued to shift. And here we are. Yes, indeed. Miriam says, I think some things people find normal today is appalling to me. Well, exactly. It just seems to be, what is excusable and what is inexcusable at any particular moment in time just depends on what way the wind is blowing. Opinions change and minds change and humans change and ages change, and we think we're growing up and we think we're less savage, but I don't know, are we? The custom of putting kings to death as soon as they suffered from any personal defect prevailed 2 centuries ago in the Caffrey kingdom of Sofala. We have seen that these kings of Sofala were regarded as gods by their people, being entreated to give rain or sunshine according as each might be wanted. Nevertheless, a slight bodily blemish, such as the loss of a tooth, was considered a sufficient cause for putting one of these godmen to death, as we have learned from the following passage of an old Portuguese historian. Quote, it was formerly the custom of the kings of this land to commit suicide by taking poison when any disaster or natural physical defect fell upon them, such as impotence, infectious disease, the loss of their front teeth, by which they were disfigured, or any other deformity or affliction. Wow. To put an end to such defects, they killed themselves, saying that the king should be free from any blemish, and if not, it was better for his honour that he should die and seek another life where he would be made whole, for there everything was perfect. Interested to see what some of the modern medieval scholars and scholars of Old and Middle Irish would think about all of this in terms of the propensity for the kings of our own customs to be free from blemish. The fact that there are so many powerful connections with Africa, where does that come from? But the Quiteve king, Quiteve, Quiteve, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, Quiteve king, who reigned when I was in those parts, would not imitate his predecessors in this. Being discreet and dreaded as he was, for having lost a front tooth, he caused it to be proclaimed throughout the kingdom that all should be aware that he had lost a tooth and should recognize him when they saw him without it. And if his predecessors killed themselves for such things, they were very foolish. And he would not do so. On the contrary, he would be very sorry when the time came for him to die a natural death, for his life was very necessary to preserve his kingdom and to defend it from his enemies. And he recommended his successors to follow his example, unquote. The king of Sofala, who dared to survive the loss of his front tooth, was thus a bold reformer like Ergomenes, king of Ethiopia. All I want for Christmas are me 2 front teeth. Do. Yes, indeed. We may conjecture that the ground for putting the Ethiopian kings to death was, as in the case of the Zulu and Sofala kings, the appearance on their person of any bodily defect or sign of decay, and that the oracle which the priests alleged as the authority for the royal execution was to the effect that great calamities would result from the reign of a king who had any blemish on his body. Just as an oracle warned Sparta against a, quote, lame reign, unquote, that is, the reign of a lame king. It is some confirmation of this conjecture that the kings of Ethiopia were chosen for their size, strength, and beauty long before the custom of killing them was abolished. To this day, the Sultan of Wadai must have no obvious bodily defect, and the king of Angoi cannot be crowned if he has a single blemish, such as a broken or a filed tooth or the scar of an old wound. According to the Book of Achail and many other authorities, no king who was afflicted with a personal blemish might reign over Ireland at Tara. And I wonder is that the Book of Achail. Anyway, hence, when the great King Cormac MacArt lost one eye by an accident, he at once abdicated. So at last, Frazer is mentioning Ireland, as we have been on several occasions this evening. Just catching up on the comments. Yes, Michael Trott, very true. Some of the current batch of nation leaders would be wanting shortness, greetings, aging, more blemishes of character. Well, plenty of those. Well, well, could you imagine? Get a big zit, well, off with his head. uh, my mum used to sing that. If you asked her what she'd like for Christmas, who is that? I apologize again for having to refer to the Mythical Ireland community because the names are not coming up. That is Margaret McKenna. All I want for Christmas is me two front teeth. Or if you weren't going to be good, a sack of coal. Many days' journey to the northeast of Abomey, the old capital of Dahomey, lies the kingdom of Ao. The Aos are governed by a king no less absolute than the king of Dahomey, yet subject to a regulation of state at once humiliating and extraordinary. When the people have conceived an opinion of his ill government, which is sometimes insidiously infused into them by the article of his disconnected ministers, by the artifice of his discontented ministers. Oh, Anthony, you need to read it correctly. They send a deputation to him with a present of parrots' eggs as a mark of its authenticity, to represent to him that the burden of government must have so far fatigued him that they consider it full time for him to repose from his cares and indulge himself with a little sleep. Little sleep being a euphemism for dying, I presume. He thanks his subjects for their attention to his ease, retires to his own apartment as if to sleep, and there gives directions to his women to strangle him. This is immediately executed, and his son quietly ascends the throne upon the usual terms of holding the reins of government no longer than whilst he merits the approbation of the people. Unquote. About the year 1774, a king of Ayo, whom his ministers attempted to remove in the customary manner, positively refused to accept the proffered parrot's eggs at their hands, telling them that he had no mind to take a nap. Not taking a nap, he's gonna go swim with the fishes. But on the contrary, was resolved to watch for the benefit of his subjects. The ministers, surprised and indignant at his recalcitrancy, raised a rebellion, but were defeated with great slaughter. And thus, by his spirited conduct, the king freed himself from the tyranny of his councillors and established a new precedent for the guidance of his successors. However, the old custom seems to have revived and persisted until late in the 19th century, for a Catholic missionary writing in 1884, speaks of the practice as if it were still in vogue. Another missionary, writing in 1881, thus describes the usage of the Egbas and the Yorubas of West Africa. Quote, among the customs of the country, one of the most curious is unquestionably that of judging and punishing the kings. Should he have earned the hatred of his people by exceeding his rights, one of his councillors, on whom the heavy duty is laid, requires of the prince that he shall, quote, go to sleep, unquote, which means simply, quote, take poison and die, unquote. If his courage fails him, and remember, we're still in a quote here, at the supreme moment, a friend renders him this last service, and quietly, without betraying the secret, they prepare the people for the news of the king's death. In Yoruba, the thing is managed a little differently. When a son is born to the king of Oyo, they make a model of the infant's right foot in clay and keep it in the house of the elders, the Ogboni. If the king fails to observe the customs of the country, a messenger, without speaking a word, shows him the child's foot. The king knows what that means. He takes poison and goes to sleep, unquote. The old Prussians acknowledged as their supreme lord a ruler who governed them in the name of the gods and was known as, quote, God's mouth, unquote. When he himself felt weak and ill, if he wished to leave a good name behind him, he had a great heap made of thorn bushes and straw, on which he mounted and delivered a long sermon to the people, exhorting them to serve the gods and promising to go to the gods and speak for the people. Then he took some of the perpetual fire which burned in front of the holy oak tree, and lighting the pile with it, burned himself to death. And thus passes Denethor, the steward of Gondor. Wow. Unbelievable stuff. I definitely think that is going to, when the video is available afterwards, definitely think that is going to have to come with a health warning. You know, this contains themes of, yeah, definitely not for young ears anyway, I don't think. That was heavy going. That is Frazer, but it's not all like that, I promise you. But I mean, that is the reality of, and that is probably why some of the people who practice these customs came to be known as savages, because the modern Victorian mind, as it were, could not contemplate the savagery of such acts. I'm going away for a sleep now. I've got a grey hair. I'm going for a sleep now. Please don't mourn me. Go glug down a cup of poison, or get your wife to strangle you, or your harem of wives, Chungus Khan enjoyed that. I mean, he seems to be reveling in. Not sure if we identified whether you're male or female or non-specific in the past, but I assumed you were a he there, which I apologize for if I'm wrong. You're a great narrator, says Neve. Thank you, but I mean. Miriam says the Victorian people robbed zombies to have sex parties with them, so I don't think they have room to talk about it. Of course, may we, Totally cool. 10 out of 10. Excellent reading. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Very male, very entertained, says Chungus. Okay. Oh, yeah, well, which is why we shouldn't always, as I said, there's something very important here, which feeds into some discussions that have been going on online recently, which is, we shouldn't assume that for instance, Newgrange Nouth and Douth and the great Neolithic monuments are all sort of happy clappy, sort of, yay, we're celebrating the harvest and we're celebrating the abundance of food and we're hoping that the sun god, the Dagda, shines his light down upon us and makes sure that we have a good harvest next year. We don't know whether these people were slaughtering and sacrificing and killing kings, and what's that called? Regicide, isn't it? Regicide, the murder of a king. Yes, indeed. Cheers, Anthony. Education with a laugh. Good night, everyone. Good night, Wayne. We'll see you hopefully next week, but we'll hopefully see you on my own attempts to do some streaming from Newgrange over the next few mornings. Cy B, yes, Cy is asking, is this live stream off this year? It is not happening because live, real people are going into the chamber, the lottery winners, to witness. Hopefully some of them will see some sunshine, but the forecast isn't good, and it was totally cloudy this morning, which was the first of the 5 mornings that the lottery winners are going to be going in. What a nice little bedtime story. I would obviously encourage people to not have nightmares tonight, Dark, says Yvette, but fascinating. The light is returning. Yes, indeed. Yeah. Miriam is correcting herself. I meant mummies, not zombies. That, fair enough, but easy to see how that mix-up might have occurred. Great selection, Anthony, says Valerie. We will have more of Frazer next week. I may read it in advance and pick out a section that's perhaps a little bit less disturbing to the sensitivities of some. I don't know. You're all enjoying this. I know that, and I know you're all adults, and I'm not saying, but there may be people who will watch that episode back and go, "Oh my God, that is totally crazy. That is totally effed up," Thanks for a very unusual Mythflix, says Joe. Happy solstice to the mighty Tua. Yes. An awakening story for New Zealand time, 10:30 a.m. Wow. A very good morning to you, Michael. A very good Tuesday morning from or Wednesday evening. Strange time. Wonderful episode time, Anthony. Thank God times have changed. I'd say you're safe as our leader. Sleep well. Listen, I've got enough blemishes, missing teeth, chipped teeth. I've got the grey hairs. I've got lots of scars. I've enough defects. 5 kids, so I do. No problems in that department. Desiree says a very unique Christmas special this year. Yes, indeed, but we will, as I say, I'm going to make every effort to stream from Newgrange. Maybe tomorrow morning, maybe on the official day of solstice, which is Wednesday, when we will have the usual, as I say, big gathering. And it's always lovely, don't get me wrong, the atmosphere is nice, but there are people who turn up at Newgrange on the 21st and they're not seen in the Boyne Valley for the other 364 days of the year. It's always a fascinating spectacle. Adrian says, Banachtin na nullag Ihawa Akarja, August to Fain, Adrian, August the van, your woman, August to Karen Fain. Barbara Murphy, a great surname, Barbara. I've lost your comment now. Happy solstice to everyone. Working, so couldn't read and comment. Darn it. Not to worry, Barbara. Good of you to say hello anyway. Missing teeth comes with 5 kids, says Karen. Do you live near a bog? Says Brendan. That's a rather sinister question, isn't it? I'm not telling you, Michelle Woodburn is wishing everyone a happy solstice, many happy returns. And remember that to all intents and purposes, we have reached the shortest days. The sun's rising and setting positions will not change. The day will not be noticeably longer or shorter over the next few days. We are at the time of the solstice. The official moment of the minimum declination of the sun is at 21:47 Universal Time on Wednesday, which is actually in the evening time. But Wednesday, the 21st, being the shortest day of the year. Tarini Pendleton says, Gurmahagut and happy solstice. You're very welcome. Margaret McKenna saying, Banachti na nullag Giev Golair August Tufain. Margaret, thank you for joining us. Put Coda on patrol, says Patricia. Yes, absolutely. You definitely protect me from the people who are saying, Anthony, is that a grey hair we see? Would you mind coming into this tent for a moment? Oh, well, who's in the tent? Oh, it's only your wife with a rope. Oh, God. Get out there and observe that solstice sun, everyone, says Archaeoastronomy Database. Dead right, 100%. Tom King says, great fun tonight. Don't know whether to stand up or sit down after that one. Thank you, Anthony. And stay safe out there, the mighty Tua, until next time. Yes, indeed. Let us not think about sacrificing any of our leaders. Let us wish them the greatest of health and prosperity. And let us consider the grey hairs, signs of wisdom, to be embraced, to be cherished, and not to be considered defects. Keep your heads, clear the ropes for the Christmas August solstice, says Michael. Good morning to you, Michael. Thank you. Jungus is still laughing. Having a great time tonight. Well, that's episode number 205. More Frazer next week, but in the meantime, as I say, I will do my best to provide some streams from Newgrange. If I can figure out, maybe I can stream through. I'm not sure if there's a Melon app. I will investigate, because that would mean streaming to both Facebook and YouTube, because I know there are some people who are only watching on YouTube and who are not on Facebook. And it would be unfair, I think, to only stream on Facebook. But if that's what I have to do, because I'm limited by the technology, then that's what I'll have to do. Unfortunately, you'll have to just live with that. But I will, of course, upload that to YouTube afterwards. Anthony, our fearless leader, says Patricia. I wouldn't say that. I'm not going to sleep tonight now. I'm going to be watching the shadows. Anyway, in the meantime, all have a great, great week. Enjoy the solstice. The year is turning yet again. We began all of this, the live streaming, in March of 2020, over 2.5 years ago, 2 years and 9 months ago, actually. So let's keep going as long as we can. Karen Burns says, happy solstice. Thanks so much for the fun evening. You're very welcome, Karen. Glad you enjoyed it. Patricia Pack says, shorter days, more time for hibernating. Yeah, we should look at what nature does at this time of the year too, and think about just relaxing a little bit. Mez Marion says, thank you for all you share. You're very welcome. Very happy to share it, and with so many wonderful people and like-minded people and kind-hearted people. Thanks. Entertaining episode, says Neve. Yes. I'm glad so many of you seem to have enjoyed it. It was a bit on the sensational side, and as I said, comes with a PG warning. If you're going to watch this, back with your kids, just warn them. There are significant adult themes, like all those warnings that come on movies these days, sexual references, threat of violence, actual violence, death, suicide, all of that stuff. Would you be well at all? Dina Spark says, great episode. Thank you. You're very welcome. Go gently, folks. We will see you hopefully in the morning from Newgrange. Certainly I will be hoping to be there with cameras and with phone and do some streaming and take some photos and get some video. And hopefully we'll get a bit of sunshine. Pray that we do. Let's keep that in mind. Let's look for the brightness as the light begins to turn. 7 3s, as they say in ham radio. All the very best to you at Kulasov, Ikawa, Kulasov, Slongafol, and, of course, most importantly, Toga Bugay. Take it easy.